about is the importance of org management and why, having a tidy org, an org that's optimized and cleaned up, should be a priority for you with Salesforce. So obviously, this is probably something that everybody knows, but as orgs get older, they grow in complexity because people add more stuff to them. You build more apps, you add more profiles, permission sets, workflows, page layouts, you name it. And that all goes in to add to the complexity. And with a company like ours that's worked with, a lot of the Fortune 500, some of the largest Salesforce orgs out there, that complexity really grows to a point where manually it becomes impossible for them to really grasp it or get their hands around it. So we're going to talk today about, not only what the problems that are caused by this type of complexity, but what you can do about it. So org complexity can be caused by a wide range of things. But one thing is administrator turnover. A lot of companies, I spoke with a company just recently that had a 10-year-old org and had been through 20 different administrators that were kind of in charge of that org. So you can imagine over time, each of those administrators, made their own changes, did their own stuff. And as each new administrator came in, they really had no idea what was done before them. And now, 10 years down the line, that complexities, that technical debt, that leftover stuff is a real problem for them. Another thing that can cause it, corporate mergers or acquisitions. If you, bring another company's Salesforce org in from a merger or an acquisition, suddenly you've got a whole another environment that's going to be merged in with yours, and that obviously can cause a lot of complexity. Obviously, org age is probably one of the most common ones. Just naturally, as we talked about on the first slide, over time, as an org ages, it becomes more complex. Salesforce never gets more simple, it just gets more complex, and that's really what you see over time. And then other things can cause those problems to sort of propagate, like poor change and release management practices. If you've got a lot of technical debt and a badly put together security model and a bunch of inactive users that haven't been cleaned up, and you're pushing those downstream in your release process, you're really just rolling that problem on to other orgs. So, there's other things like your process that can actually contribute to complexity and actually having it sort of spread like a virus, right? So what happens when an org gets unmanageably complex? Well, one thing is reduced agility. The speed at which you can roll out applications, for example, can be greatly reduced. I had a customer that had all these unused fields and they eventually hit their field limit for Salesforce. Well, they couldn't roll out any new apps that needed new fields because they'd hit their limit, but they needed to clean that up, but they didn't really know what to clean up, what was being used, what wasn't, that kind of stuff. Slow performance. As we move to Lightning, as everybody a lot of people have, and a lot of people are still getting there, the more stuff on a page in Lightning, the slower it loads. So if you have, stuff on your page layouts, unused fields, whatever it is, you really want an optimized org because that can make it slower. And some people say, well, how big of a deal is that? Well, what if your page loads in 6 seconds rather than 3, right? That's 3 seconds longer. Doesn't seem like that big a deal. But imagine an organization with 10,000 users waiting an extra 3 seconds over the span of years, and, it's a problem. Also, IT business misalignment, right? A lot of times, this complexity can make it hard to roll out new features and things. And then, also that complexity causes confusion with your users. I had a customer who had a user that was assigned to the wrong page layout, and they were laying data into the wrong fields for months and months and months, and nobody caught it. So there's all kinds of ways that, the IT department that's managing Salesforce can get misaligned with the business units that are relying on it to operate efficiently. So what do you do about it? Well, one thing is, first, you got to understand it. You got to document it. You have to understand where the complexity is, where the problems are. You have to identify what part of that complexity is debt. In other words, unused stuff. Everybody probably has it. You can think of all the common places like fields or unused reports or email templates, but really it can exist everywhere. Too many profiles, inactive users with things attached to them, queues, groups, roles that aren't being used. It just goes on and on. You can have technical debt all across all of your metadata in the org, and identifying that's going to be critical. And then obviously eliminating it, right? Once you identify it, you want to get rid of it. You probably want to have a way to roll back in case you have an oopsie moment while you're eliminating those things. And then also security is a really big place that people don't necessarily think about as debt. But, over time, you get a lot of orgs with way too many profiles, for example. So, for example, we've had, customers that every time someone needed a different security setting, they just duplicate a profile and make that change. And then they have these one-to-one relationships between profiles and users. So, you really want to simplify that, move into a permission set group model and add some simplicity, maintain your security, but add some simplicity to your security model. Here's the problem. The problem is that doing these things, as we stated before, manually could be almost impossible. If you have a big enough org with enough complexity, and these problems just magnify in scale. And if that scale gets too big, then you're really left with, something that can't really be grasped by a person manually. So what you're really going to have are the right tools to tackle it with in that scenario. And that kind of leads us to our tool, Snapshot. This is something that we have done. We've really tried to comprehensively attack the org complexity problem at its different points and provide those tools to administrators so that they can go out and manage the problem. And, we have over 60 of the Fortune 500 as customers who are actively using these tools to do that in some of the most giant and complex orgs that exist for Salesforce. So if you look at our tool, a lot of that complexity problem is tackled on the left-hand side here. We really kind of break our tool into two ideas. One is things we do inside the org. That's what you see on the left here. And then things we do between orgs. So, if you look at org documentation, that's really where you're going to be able to do schema documentation, to do process documentation, the things that you're going to need to understand where your complexity is. We do org optimization and cleanup. We actually analyze every piece of metadata in the org and come back and tell you what we think is not being used. So it covers everything: your fields, your pick list values, your groups, your queues, your roles, your reports, your email templates. You name it, we analyze it. And we've integrated our release tools into those reports. So right from within those reports, you can do a quick action to immediately delete them. And everything is backed up in case you have an oopsie moment and need to go retrieve something. We do profile and permission set management. Another really big part of org complexity or debt is the profile and permission set. That's somewhere else that can become a tangled spider web of security and complexity. So we have tools that will map out your security so you can document it and understand it. It kind of does it in an Excel style matrix. And right from within that matrix, you can do live editing to make rapid changes rather than doing them piece by piece inside of Salesforce. You can immediately deploy those changes back into the org or downstream to another org if you needed to. We also give you other tools. You can look through the eyes of any user and look at any security setting and tell you how they got there, walk you through their profiles and their permission sets. We can also do things like user cleanup. So this would be, if someone, one example would be if someone moved to another department or maybe someone left the company and became inactive, everything still stays connected to them, right? So you could have an inactive user with workflows or dashboards that they're the running user for, right? You could have data like opportunities or cases that are still assigned to that user who's now inactive. And you may want to map that to an active user or to another user that's taken over that role. So we have tools to help you do that. And that's something that's really, really hard to do, especially in a massive org for an administrator. So those are all things that help you document, understand the complexity of your org, help you optimize it and clean it up, both from a technical debt in terms of, reports and things like that, as well as a security model and even a user capability. And then on the other side of the fence, which is really the right side here, we do clicks not code release management, and we do relational data migration. So once you've got your org whipped into shape, that is the time to put it into a release cycle. You remember earlier we talked about how putting an unfit org into a release cycle can really pass the problems downstream. So on the front end, we're tackling those problems, and then we're giving you the actual tools to go ahead and manage the releases. So full release management solution that would replace something like change sets just gives you a lot more power and a lot more functionality than you get with something like change sets. And then we can also move data as well. So if you need to repopulate a refresh sandbox or, grab training data from production, scramble some sensitive fields and drop it in a sandbox for your dev team, we can handle those kind of things as well. For today's demo, we're really going to be focusing on that left-hand side of the slide here. What you need to do, what tools you can use to identify and optimize and get your org whipped into shape. So that's what we're going to do now. Let's go ahead and jump over to our snapshot tool. All right, hopefully everybody can see that. Okay, so this is Snapshot, and Snapshot is a visual tool. It's really done visually with drag and drop, and the idea here is that this is a workspace, and you can drag and drop blue icons that we call a snapshot that help you connect to a Salesforce org. So you can see here, I've got a simple layout. I've got a sandbox connected to a staging org, connected to a production org. For a Fortune 500 customers of ours, this might look a lot more complex, but we're just keeping it simple for today's demo. So to start off, we're going to show you how do you connect to an org and how do you back it up so that you can go find out where all this technical debt and these problems are. So we're going to drag on one of these blue icons, and what it's going to do is it's going to ask me to log into the org and back it up. Now, this could be any kind of org, a production org, Salesforce DX, developer, sandbox. If you're using custom domain or you're doing SSO into your org, we support all of that. And then what happens is you log into that org, and it takes you to the next screen where it will create a metadata backup of that org. And this is the fundamental base that's needed to report, to analyze, to clean up, and to do all the things that we're going to be doing today. And it's also, of course, the fundamental base if you, after that, move on to doing release management or something else with the tool. And we will capture the entire org. The size of the org doesn't matter. We'll intelligently, Salesforce has limits on how much metadata you can grab at a time, but we'll intelligently break your metadata up, do as many retrieves as is necessary, and then stitch it all back together to give you a complete and cohesive backup of your org. So as I said, we've got some of the largest Salesforce orgs, out there using this tool now to back up their orgs. Now, these can also be scheduled. So this is sort of where disaster recovery comes in. Maybe you want to back up an org, I don't know, every day, every week, every month, whatever makes sense for your change windows and everything else, you can do. And you can also have those backups placed somewhere that's centralized or that you'd like to have it. Maybe you want it on a network drive or on a SharePoint server. Maybe you want to store it back into Salesforce content. All of that's possible. You can kind of set up the workflow here. Okay, so once you've backed up an org, obviously you can connect these orgs using these drag and drop deploy arrows, right? So the idea here is that, you could connect anything to anything, production to production, sandbox to production, whatever it may be. And what we do is then once that's done, the tool works off really 2 right clicks, okay? You can right click on an arrow between 2 orgs, and then you could deploy metadata. You could do a quick deployment or rollback, set up CI. You could do comparisons, and you could move data, as we talked about before. But today we're really going to be focusing on the right click on an org, which takes you into where you can report on all of the things that make your org complex and find ways to alleviate that. So from here, you see we've kind of broken things into categories. We could visualize the org. We could document it, lots of reports to document how your org is structured. We could optimize it. So lots of tools here for optimization. We'll look at some of those today. And then lots of tools for managing your profiles and your permission sets, your user activity, things like that as well. So you can kind of guess by the category what these reports are designed for. We're going to start out here with visualizing the org. The first thing we're going to do is just look at the org metadata. So this seems kind of boring on the surface. You've got a list of all your metadata here that we captured in our backup. And if I click on something like custom objects, I get a list of it over here. And I could even go a little further and look at the XML for it if I'm feeling developer-y. But really why I showed this to you is because this is a searchable interface where you could search any piece of metadata, anything in the org, and find out where the touch points are, where it's being used. So let's, we've got a custom object selected here. Let's go ahead and click our search palette and find out where this custom object is being used. So here we get the results. It's, used in these page layouts, this workflow, these custom tabs, right? And anytime you see a report or a matrix in our tool, you can simply right-click and export it to a CSV, a PDF, an HTML, or an Excel file. Excel's probably the most popular, but all those options are there. This is a fully searchable interface. I could search for a queue or a role or a group or whatever it is. Maybe I just want to search for a user. So let's just put in a user email here and find out everywhere that user's touched in the org. So there we have it, pretty extensive. This user is used in these custom sites, these workflows, these assignment rules. You can see here a bunch of dashboards. If I click on it, I can see this user is actually the running user for that dashboard. So this is just a really useful place to help understand, what's going on with that complexity in your org, searching for any type of metadata or user or whatever it may be and finding where the touch points are. Okay, so let's go back to that right click and let's go in and visualize profiles. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how to get your security model put into shape. Again, a lot of times people don't necessarily think of that as technical debt, but it surely is. If you've got a security model that's not simplified enough or not properly optimized, it's definitely going to cause you problems. And I'm sure most of the administrators out there with complex security models know this intimately. So we're going to view profiles. And like I said before, what we do is we map profiles out into a matrix. Now, I've got this trimmed down to just look at a few profiles, but let's go ahead and open it up and look at all profiles versus all object permissions. And what you can see is we're charting this sort of like you would in Excel. Going down the left-hand column, here's all my profiles. And across the top, here's my object security. And I can sit here and scroll through, quickly identify, like for my contract manager, I have create, delete, edit, read for the account, right? So this is a quick way to visualize and understand the security. I could do this for any part of the profile. So maybe I want to look at flow accesses, or maybe I want to look at tab visibility, or whatever it may be. All those little parts and pieces of the security are available here from this dropdown. And anytime, again, that I see this, I can go ahead and export this out to share or to manipulate in Excel or do whatever I want to do. Now, that trim was important that we kind of looked at briefly. Let's look at it again. I could come in here and trim this down so that I could really target if I'm having specifically need to look at some profiles. So maybe I just want to see these 3 profiles, and maybe I just want to see these object permissions. And now I get a much more concise matrix that's trimmed down to just what I want to see. And we go even further than that. We can also go into editing mode. So now you could see, for example, we have account custom settings. These profiles have no access to it. Let me go and select those. Maybe I want to select some other stuff here. Let's give access to the account contact role for the admin and maybe the account team member. Let's add whatever security we want, apply it, make those changes on the fly. So now we've actually changed the metadata there on that backup. Now this is where we talked about how we've smartly put our deployments into our reporting. And this is what we call a smart deploy, where it kind of knows what you want to do and whips up a quick deployment rather than you having to go build one and change sets or whatever your DevOps tool may be. So now if I go here and click deploy, it'll automatically build me a job list with all of those changes to those profiles. Here they are. And I can immediately jump over, do a validation, do a deployment, and fire those back into the org and make those changes on the fly. Everything is tracked. Everything is backed up. So you can go report on what changes were made, and you can go to that backup and roll it back if you need to. So this is really building smart strategic deployments into the admin workflow in a way that's, I think, never been done for Salesforce. So pretty cool stuff. Okay, so let's talk a little bit how we go deeper on profiles and permission sets. By the way, I should have noted, if you go back to that visualize, you can do the exact same thing for permission sets. It works the same way, same kind of matrix, same kind of editing, same kind of trimming. You're just looking at permission sets versus, in this case, object permissions. So again, all the functionality you saw for profiles available for permission sets as well. Now let's look at security by user. This is a different way to sort of flip that you look at security. So I'm going to go to this security menu, and we're going to go to that profile and permission set report that I have there. So on the high level, this looks like, well, what we just saw, right? I could look at my object permissions, my flow accesses, whatever, do the same for permission sets. There's your matrix, right? But what we're actually doing that I think is unique is that we're also giving you a combination of those two things together. And what that does is it lets you select users and see the combined security across profiles and permission sets for any part. So here's where combined security is. I could select whatever security I want to be in my report. Let's keep it simple and just look at object permissions, right? Now let's go over to display report. Now from here, I could click this select users button, and I could select users by name or role or profile or permission set or even user permission. Maybe I want to see everyone who has modify all data. Okay, and then once I've added, I can add, search for those and add over here to the right whatever users I want to see. Let's just stick with the two we have. And then now we've got the object permissions, and we could go to any object permission and see how that user got there. All right, so we're looking at the detailed report. Let's drop it down here and just look at the pure security. So for Bill here, I can see for the account, he has create, delete, edit, read, and view. Okay, the question is, how did he get there, and why is it highlighted in green? So let's go into the detailed report, and what we do here is we walk you through that security, starting with the profile. That's the top line here. So we can see for the standard user, Bill has read and view, right? And then we have 3 permission sets, 1, 2, 3. One gives read, one gives deleted, edit, read, so forth, that elevate Bill's security to where his combined security, that's the last line, and that's what the ultimate security is full CRUD, right? Create, delete, edit, read, view. The reason we highlight that in green is because we want you to know that security has been elevated by permission sets from the profile. That's something that, going and jumping around all the pieces to figure this out in Salesforce is painful. So we highlight that to let you know, hey, Bill's security on the profile gets elevated by these permission sets, and this is what you get. Now look at Tim Barnes here for the same thing. Tim was an admin. You look at that top line, admin with full access. Then we assigned 3 what I would say are redundant, permission sets that continue to grant access, which ultimately, of course, ends up with full access. The reason we highlight that in red is because we want you to know that there's redundant security there. In other words, Tim had all the security on the first line from the profile. Then he got assigned a bunch of permission sets, which redundantly gave him more security that he didn't need. So that might be bloat. That might be something that you want to optimize or to clean up. So you could, we highlight that in red to draw your attention there. So you could do this for any users, for any security setting, across any profile or any permission set, and really see how their security is, okay? So pretty nice tools there for documenting your security, for editing your security, for looking at security by users. The last thing that I'll show you on the security side is our user permission assignment. So back in that security menu, I'm selecting user permission assignments here. Here is where you could actually do reassignments. Actually, not only do we give you tools to document and understand what's going on, but we always try to give you tools to become actionable, to let you see how to make, to actually make those changes. So from here, I have that same select users interface where I could select users by all the, search for them by all the different categories, add whoever I want over here to the right, and then I can put them into a mode where I could click on any user, and it's going to show me what their profile is, what permission sets are assigned, what permission set groups. I don't have any in this demo org, so that's why there's none there. And here I can actually redo the assignments on the fly. So maybe Bill actually should have these 2 permission sets as well. I click save. I just made that change in real time back into the Salesforce org. But where this gets interesting is you could flip it, right? So you could come in here and say, let's look at this by permission set using this radio button at the top. Now, when I select a permission set, it shows me over here what users are assigned to it. So in this case, maybe Josh should also have it, and I could go ahead and click save and do that assignment. So I could do mass assignments this way as well. So you could flip it to look from any angle and do those assignments en masse if needed, much more rapidly than the piecemealed way you would do it in Salesforce. The next tab is for creating groups, permission set groups. So once got the permission sets you want to group, here you could do them. You could calculate who's assigned to it, give it a name, and with one click, build the group, reassign the users to it, all in one shot. So again, faster way to create groups. This is probably my favorite tab, which is the Manage Profiles tab. This is pretty wild. Essentially, we have a report I would normally run before this, but in the essence of time, we're going to skip it. But essentially, we have a report that'll tell you how similar anything is in Salesforce, including profiles. So you could go run it and see, okay, this profile is 99% similar to this profile, right? Once you've identified your targets for merging, so what this is really addressing is what we talked about earlier. People who have too many profiles. They're duplicating profiles and building these one-to-one relationships between profiles and between users. So you want to move to that permission set model, simplify your security to make it more understandable, to optimize it. So once you've identified what profiles are a good target to merge, which would obviously be ones that are more similar, we could merge them. So let's take these contract manager profiles here, and let's calculate if we put them into one base profile, what permission sets would be needed for the different users to maintain the security where it is currently. And this is calculating that right now. If you've ever done this manually in Salesforce, it's some serious math. So now we're saying if we go to one base profile, we need these 4 permission sets with that many numbers. You can see how many permissions are in each one to fill in the gaps for the users. Then I could come over here and give the profile a name. I could decide whether I want to automatically reassign the users and whether I want to delete the old profiles. And with one click, I'm going to build a base profile, reassign the users, clean up the old profiles all in one shot. So if you've ever tried to merge profiles manually in Salesforce, with a complex org, it could be pretty much impossible, but it's very hard to do no matter how you shake it. This is, I think, the best and most comprehensive tool out there for doing that and can really help you move to that optimized permission set model that Salesforce wants everyone to be a part of. Okay, so there you have it. We've, kind of really hit the profile thing pretty hard. We obviously help you document and understand your security. We help you, look at security by user. We help you quickly edit and optimize your security. We help you assign users, merge profiles. Really comprehensive tools there for getting your security model whipped into shape. What we're going to talk about next is reporting for technical debt. Understanding where your other debt is in the org and then taking action on it. So we're going to, again, right-click on our org here, and we're going to go down to Document. This is where we can document lots of stuff in the org. So lots of different reports here. You could probably guess by their names what they are. Like, this is showing you your fields versus your page layouts, right? But let's talk about some of the popular ones. So Org Dictionary, this is a data dictionary. Oh, actually, let me go back. I meant to select Data Dictionary there. Data Dictionary, there we go. So this is a schema documentation for your org, right? Documenting your schema. So a lot of administrators build this with cut and paste in Excel, which is painful. I mean, I've seen a guy who had a Fortune 500 org, with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of custom objects doing this manually. It was really painful. So here I can select whatever objects I want to go into the report. We're going to select account in this case. Then I can select what object properties I want. They're all available here in the middle. Whatever I move over to the right is what goes into the report. So you can see I've selected a few there. I can also get my field properties. So this is stuff like your descriptions, your help text, the things that you want to document over here. But we also go further. We let you do relationships as well. So I could go find any other metadata and see where those fields reference it. So I've selected some common stuff here, reports, my Apex stuff, but anything's available here, workflows, whatever I might want to add. Also, we can do some other things like summary statistics. Maybe you want to get counts of how many Apex pages you have in the org, how many classes. Maybe you want to add all their names. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to scroll through it. But anyway, you could do summary statistics here. You could do your org limits. I've added some common ones like API request limits or data storage limits, but every limit's available here. Package licenses. Maybe I want to see, how many I've got Snapshot over here, how many Snapshot licenses I have, how many are available. I could add any of my packages here, and I could do the same thing for Salesforce licenses. I've added all my Salesforce licenses to the report. So let's go run this in real time for the account object. All right, so there we have it. Up top, we've got the summary statistics. I've got 293 Apex classes and 12 components. So this is a small demo org. Yours is probably much larger. And if I get through that, all my asset counts, there's my org limits and where they all stand, what percentages and whatnot. There's my org licenses and how many are available for each type. There's my package licenses for the package that I added. And then we get into the real thrust of this report. Here's my object properties. Here's my field properties. You can see everything's here, my pick list values, my descriptions, my help text, actual formulas in the formula fields. You could add anything to this. Maybe you want to document encryption schemes for Shield or, whatever. Any of those properties that are available in Salesforce are available to add to the report. And then once we've got all of those, we get into the last part. Let me scroll through all the field properties here, is the relationships. Remember, I wanted to see where these fields were being used across what Apex stuff, what reports. And it shows me for each field what all is being referenced by that field. So, those are the field relationships as well. Again, all of this is available as a right click. And I should note that every report that we've seen today is schedulable as well. So I could come in here and say, run this report every week and send it to my admin team, or run it every week and post it to Chatter, or run it every week and drop it into Salesforce content. Whatever the case may be, you can have it, in an automated fashion being delivered to you. So that's Data Dictionary. We also, in addition to schema documentation, help you document process. This is our org dictionary. This is pretty wild. We can document any metadata in the org. Yes, any. And so, tons of stuff you could document here. Let's do some stuff that's common, like workflows would be really common. I want to document, the process for my workflows, right? So let's go ahead and display that report. Preview that report. So here we go. I just documented the workflows for this work. So here's the names of the workflows. Here's the names of the rules for the different workflows. You can see how we break this down hierarchically. Here's the alert names. Here's the sender types. Here's the recipient. Here's the recipient type. Here's the actual names of the template alert templates. So, you could add or remove any parts or pieces of it that you want to see. Plus, you could see my color coding here. Color coding is available for all these reports, and it's customizable. I can come in. It's kind of like building a report. I could add whatever I want to custom code. Like you saw, I had sender type custom coded there. And then you could look at, and build sort of like you build a Salesforce report, turn this field green if the owner's Tom Appleton, and that way it'd be highlighted as green. So it really lets you target and highlight parts of your reports that you may need to focus on by using color coding. So anyway, that's an example of process documentation. That doesn't have to just be workflows. Maybe I want to document my sharing rules or my tabs or whatever it may be. It can be documented that way. So lots of different ways to document and understand that org, including relationship matrices, all different ways to understand your org and your complexity. Now let's talk about actually getting rid of some of that technical debt. So there's lots of different ways that we offer org optimization. Again, you could probably read a lot of these, like last activity dates, and figure out what it's doing, right? Apex code quality, Apex code coverage, that kind of thing. But let's hit on a few highlights. One would be field usage. So field usage is kind of like Field Trip, but on steroids, right? If you've used Field Trip before. So we could go in here for any particular object, and I could run the usage. Now, maybe I want to run it for, only accounts with this, type or whatever, or, just by name or whatever. But in our case, we got a small org, so I'm just going to run it for all of them. And that's what it's doing here, is it's actually crunching through all of the fields for account now in real time, and it's going to come back with the usage for that account. Now, what's going to be unique here is that we're going to show you what you expect, what fields are empty, right? I've got, so many records and so many empties of it, so that you can identify fields where, well, no one's putting data into them. But we also go a step further and we talk about default data, which I think is just as important and something you don't get with something like Field Trip. So like, look, here's the low hanging fruit. Like there's, 1,012 total records for this field, and 1,012 are empty. So that's obviously a target for a cleanup, right? There's no data there. No one's using it. But default here is just as important. Imagine this. Imagine you had a field that had, 20,000 records, and 20,000 of those were filled. Well, with Field Trip, that looks like a used field. But what if all of those records, all 20,000, were default data, meaning every time data was put into that field, it was just the default value? That could mean that field's just as useless to you or is being just as unused as a field that's completely empty. So looking at that is critical, and it really helps you understand when you're cleaning up fields. Also, we give you drill down. So I could click on something like here's billing country code. Let's sort it by the most popular values. So now I can see everything, right? There's the 785 empty right there. And then the next most filled is US with 106 and California with 30. And you can see the long tail sort of breaking down. So we give you some good analysis on the field itself. We've also built in that smart deploy here. So if I go over, let me jump back here. Okay, we got columns. Let's go to display report. I'm not going to let it go all the way through, so we don't have to sit through all of that again. Let's escape it. You can set this up. You can configure what's red, right? For some people, for us, I think it's like, fields that are 90% empty or something like that. But you could set it to whatever you want. Maybe you only want fields that are 100% empty. And then you could click that smart deploy and be right into a delete deployment to go ahead and delete out those fields with tracking and rollback all enabled. So again, just pointing out that we always build that nice hook into that smart deploy to really give you actionable workflow inside of the report itself. So let's look at another cleanup report that I think is really useful. We're going to go down and look at, under Optimize, our Forgotten Assets report. This takes the concept of sort of what we were doing with fields there, but opens it up for any metadata type. So you can think of this like Salesforce Optimizer on mega steroids. There's no limit of 50 at a time. You could run the report on as many assets as you have, and it covers every metadata type, not just a couple. So let's look at something that's pretty understandable, like maybe, I don't know, let's look at email templates. So if I click on email templates, it's going to crunch through and tell me where it thinks my email templates are not being used. Again, we use a custom algorithm for every different metadata type. And if you scroll over here, you can see in red, these are the email templates we're pretty sure are not being used. How do we figure that out? Well, in this algorithm, what we're looking for is incoming references, like sort of like Google does, right? So what we're doing here is seeing that these email templates are not connected to anything else in the Salesforce org. They're literally disconnected. So that probably means they're not being used. And then you can see down here in the green, these email templates are being used by workflows or, portals or, escalation rules, whatever it might be. We give you that connection. So, here we've got a bunch. Look at these. Last modified 2013, not connected to anything. That's definite cleanup stuff. So again, what we do is we allow you to go into that display report here. And from there, we have that smart deploy. So again, I could click right here and immediately build a list of the email templates that we need to delete. And these are set up as a delete job. You can see here, I could do a validation, first if I wanted, and then I could go ahead, bam, and make that deployment, make those deletions and have rollback available. So again, smart deploy completely integrated into the tool to help you not only understand where your technical debt is, but actually do the work to clean it up vastly faster than you can do within the org itself. So, on this topic of optimizing, cleaning up the org, I think we've hit some good highlights to help you understand. Obviously, lots more ways to identify and optimize and get rid of debt in other places. We obviously don't have time to cover all that today, but I want to show you another place that I think is really interesting and is really underserved for the most part in the Salesforce ecosystem, and that is cleaning up users. So we're going to go to our user connection cleanup. Now, what this does is it lets me select any subset of users, same user selection interface we've seen a few times already. And then I could select any of those users. So again, I could do this en masse. I could clean up a whole bunch of users at once if I want. Like maybe I want to, go in here and search for all of my inactive users, right? And pull all those in. Maybe I'm doing an inactive user cleanup. Lots of ways to slice it. But let's stick with one now to keep it simple. So I've selected Bill here. Now what I've got over here is all of the metadata hooks that could be connected to that user in the org. And remember, if a user becomes inactive, it doesn't make any of that go away. So, maybe I could select which ones I want. Maybe I don't want specific ones, or maybe I want all of it. But, it's workflows, portals, whatever it is, escalation rule emails, team members, everything that, from a metadata perspective that I might want to remap. And then what I do is I move to this next tab, which is the user cleanup tab, and I can go in and select who I want to map it to. We'll leave it with Josh for now. And with this button click here, all of that metadata is going to be reassigned to Josh and taken away from that user. So again, if you've ever done this manually in Salesforce, it's really brutal, and we help you do it. But not only do we do it for metadata, we do it for data as well. So on this owner cleanup tab, I could select any data that I want to clean up. So let's go to something that's pretty common like case. Maybe we want all of the open cases because they're moving to a new department to be reassigned to Josh, but I could select as much data of any type that I want here, can search through to find, things that I want, and then click that button and that data is going to be remapped to the other user. So again, this is a place where when people talk about your technical debt in the Salesforce org, they oftentimes don't think about, but it's a huge problem for a lot of companies, especially some of the large giant Salesforce orgs with lots of users. Some of them have hundreds of inactive users with things connected to them that have just sort of sat there over time, and it's a giant problem. So we really give you the tools to get that fixed, to get that moved on to, to the right place. Okay, well, I think, we've hit a lot today. To kind of summarize, let me just jump back lastly here to our slide. If you're interested in finding out more about our tool, we obviously looked at one major piece of it there. Let me jump to this slide. Thank you. And then so, we jumped to one major piece of it there, and that is, really the cleanup side. Our tool also, of course, does full release management, full data migration. You saw some of those really cool hooks, how we built our release management into the reporting for rapid admin. I mean, we have administrators that have other tools. They use a different tool for release management, but they use our tool all the time to do those smart deploys. So if you'd like a demo, you can find us in all these various ways. You can look us up on the App Exchange under Snapshot. We've got a 14-day trial. We'd love to give you a demo and really dive into the details and show you how the tool can work for you. And I hope this was useful for everybody, and we thank you very much for your time.